Hello, my name is Sin Bagley, and I'm reading a story from Alex Tellez from Graphically Alex out of his book New Romantics. I will put a copy of the link to his book down in the description. Okay, here it goes. The story's called Clean. The drought was the very worst. I remember feeling the hot Santa Ana winds blowing as I stood outside in the unbearable heat. Southern California was experiencing an autumn that was hot as hell once again in mid-October. We were all waiting and hoping for the first rain of the season to come and put an end to the fires that were swirling around the greater Los Angeles area. I was trying to lose weight, but I was getting tired. I remember trying to get an exercise program to last, but it never would. I always thought that maybe the heat would keep me motivated, but it never did. All it did was lead me to chapped lips and exhaustion. It was such an uphill battle. One day the experts say leg exercises get you more pounds lost. The next they are all saying it's all about the arms. I was just swaying back and forth on the scale, and in the end I ended up being exactly the same as when I started. No matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't fit into that dress. I hung it up in my kitchen on the door to the pantry to help discourage midnight snacking. I wanted to fit into it again, even though I knew it was unrealistic. I was so little back when I bought it. The dress was covered in wine that I'd spilled all over it, and I couldn't really wear it out again anyways, but still, I wanted it to fit again. I've been following an exercise routine religiously. It was simple. Whenever I felt hungry, I was supposed to walk. I looked in the mirror, and I swore I was starting to look smaller. I would even talk to my friends about it on the phone. Yeah, I'd say, it's just crazy. I make it through another day of dieting and exercise. I'm like looking in the mirror, thinking, damn girl, you are on it. My friends would always laugh, though of course they didn't actually know what I was doing. I couldn't tell them all of my secrets. We'd talk on the phone for a while, and then I'd say that we should get together again sometime soon, but we never did. I was always too busy walking. I think I had a good life in my house. It was a pretty little one-bedroom surrounded by rocks. I planted a flower garden towards the beginning of the year with my family. But when the drought struck, the news said that we needed to save as much water as we could, so I stopped watering the flowers altogether. I didn't need them, right? It didn't bother me that much because I had walking to do. I walked in the morning, and I walked in the night. I would walk on my lunch breaks at work. Everyone always saw me walking, and they congratulated me on my efforts. I would tell them how excited I was for the results, and that it was hard, but I knew it would pay off. They'd smile, and we'd part ways. I remember looking at the flower garden every time I stepped out of my house to walk, and seeing it die a little more each day, a little more each time. At first, the red one faded away, then the yellow, then the blue. Soon they were all nothing but dried, soulless husks that merely remind me of what they used to be. My life continued in this way until one day I looked up in the sky and saw that the dark clouds were rolling in. Everyone in my area was so excited at the possibility of rain. The news had been talking about it for the past week, acting like it was going to be the storm of the century. I remember walking in the glooming weather and feeling the cold breeze swirl around me. I could feel the tension in the air, the electricity that is the only present when there is about to be a storm. I got irritated with the fact that I wasn't going to be able to walk that night, so I decided I would make up for it by finally weighing in. I've been itching to get on that scale for a while, and I was ready to see the results. I walked up the steps to my door, but not before staring at those dead flowers for a second. I stepped through the door of my house, and I could hear it starting to rain outside. I walked into my bathroom and took the scale out of the cabinet underneath the sink. I itched my arm after setting it on the floor and took off almost every article of clothing I was wearing. I tried to go to the bathroom, and I hadn't eaten any food all day. I stepped onto the scale. took a breath with a smile, and looked down. I was exactly the same. I lost my smile, and my heart sank. I stepped off the scale. There was no tears in my eyes. There was no emotion in my face. I got dressed and walked through the front door like a robot, doing what it's programmed to do. The rain slapped me in the face, and I almost laughed. It looked like the news anchor was right. I'd never seen raindrops this big in Southern California. I went to my old beat-up car and drove through the pouring rain to the nearest grocery store. There were parts of the drive where I couldn't see anything, but I knew where I was going. I walked through the front doors of the store, grabbed a basket, and started picking things off the shelves. I walked quickly with a purpose. I knew exactly where everything was. I grabbed candies and cakes and pies and cookies and a roll of French bread with syrup and soda. I spent over $30 at the register, then made my way home, making sure not to make any eye contact with anyone along the way. I sat in my car, thankful for the pouring rain. It hid what I was about to do. I grabbed the candies first and ripped open the bag and ate them in handfuls. I gulped them down almost faster than I could taste them. It didn't matter. I wanted that feeling of them going down my throat. When I opened the cakes and grabbed them with my bare hands, I could feel their sponginess, and frosting was getting all over my car, but I didn't care. I knew it had to be done. I knew I had to get it all down. After the cakes, I drove home, already feeling better. I carried my bags to my room and sprawled the rest of the food out on the bed. I ate one of the cherry pies, ripping through the crust with my bare hands. I saw myself in the bedroom window. Let me start there again. I saw myself in the bedroom mirror. With my hands and mouth covered in red, I looked like an animal. I shoved the sugary goodness into me until it was gone, and then I opened the soda and tore into the French bread after drizzling syrup all over it. I dipped the syrupy bread into a tub of butter before getting it down. It was all so delicious. After I was done, I took a couple of breaths and sat on my bed. I looked in the mirror again and then quickly looked away. I was still soaking wet from walking in the rain, and I was cold. I was so nauseous. It wasn't just the food that was disgusting, it was me. I made my way to the bathroom and then promptly went to the toilet. I got on my hands and knees. I stuck a finger down my throat and gagged really loud. I've never been able to do it before, but I tried so hard that night I couldn't get it to work. I was so disappointed. I got into the shower and cried tears that felt warmer than the water pouring down my back. There had to be something that could take away this feeling. I didn't want to feel it anymore. I tried to puke in the shower, but as I was struggling to get it to work, the power went out. I stared into the darkness with my fingers still in my mouth. I got out of the shower and got dressed in the clothes I was wearing earlier that night. It was a struggle. I stumbled around in the darkness to find everything, but I had a purpose to what I was doing. I knew where I was going. I had had enough. I made my way back to my car. I drove to the nearest liquor store, and even with my windshield wipers barely working, I still knew where it was. I stepped through the doors of the liquor store and made my way to the vodka section. "It's this crazy storm out there, isn't it?" said the guy behind the register. "Yeah," I said, mesmerized by my choices of drink. Back in my heyday, Bacardi was my favorite, but Grey Goose was looking really good. I used to only get to that one for special occasions. Breaking 10 months of sobriety was certainly an event, although I didn't know if it should be celebrated. I bought both bottles and went out to my car. I stared at the dancing drops on my windshield and thought about what I was about to do. On one hand, these bottles were used to be my only comfort. They kept me warm on the coldest and darkest nights of my life. On the other, they were part of the reason why my family doesn't talk to me anymore. I thought about all of the pictures of them in my room that I used for motivation to stay clean all these months, but the thought of them struck a nerve. I'd worked so hard to get them back, and still not even a phone call. They hadn't said a word to me. Even 10 months later, they were gone. The night was the first night I'd even touched a bottle. I drove back to my house, holding my brown paper bag, and I saw the flower garden again. I stopped moving, and I fell to my knees in the dirt surrounding them. I started crying. I felt like I was at the graveyard staring at the graves of my family members. I thought about how much fun we had planning them together and what they had become. I thought about how maybe if I would have been able to lose weight, they would have come back. Maybe if I could have been what I once was for them, they would have seen me and apologized for losing faith in me. Maybe they would have loved me again. I think I took the bottles out of the bag and opened one of them, and I stared into it and took my first sip. I cried so hard. I felt like I was starting all over again. I couldn't take it. I took the bottles and smashed them on the stairs in front of my house. I crawled through the mud and I ripped every single flower out of the ground and put them into the bag. I tracked mud into my house and I stumbled in the darkness for the second time that night. I knew where every one of the pictures of my family stood, even in the darkness, and I grabbed every single one of them and threw them all in the trash, and then I took the trash out to the street. My shoes crunched on the broken glass as I climbed back up the stairs. I went to my bed and collapsed onto it, retching until I fell asleep, still covered in mud and wearing all of my clothes. I woke up in the morning feeling hungover, and the sun was shining on my face. I looked out of the bedroom window, and then I got into the shower. I scrubbed myself as the warm water flowed down my back and gave me life. When I got out of the shower, I felt clean for the first time in years. I got dressed in all my new clothes and decided to look outside to see the damage. I saw the broken glass outside my door, but instead of getting upset, I had an idea. I went to the local craft store that day and bought black and blue glass paint and a lump of red clay. When I got home, I picked up the smaller glass pieces and threw away the bigger ones. I took everything into my kitchen and sat at the table. I worked the clay into a flat square. I painted the small glass pieces black and blue and arranged them in a pattern. I pushed them down into the clay and then set my creation outside in the sun to dry. After a few days, I went to the home improvement store and bought different kinds of cactus. Some of them had little flowers on them, and others had really thick spines. I worked on my garden in broad daylight and planted them all by myself. When I was done, I put my art project right in the center of it. The sun cut the glass pieces whenever I walked by the garden. They sparkled, reminding me of that rainy night every time I went outside to walk. Eventually, I decided to throw away the dress and the scale altogether. I figured there was no point, because even if I was a little chubbier than I used to be when I drank, I would trade my sobriety for anything, and I certainly would never go back. I couldn't believe I'd almost thrown away 10 months of sobriety because of them. No matter how I should have felt, or what I should or should not have been driven to do that night, it wasn't worth the risk. I figured I'd just work on being happy before trying to lose weight again. Maybe I had gained it as a form of protection. Truthfully, at that point in my life, I was a wounded bird and I needed protection. I stopped trying to starve myself, and a life came back to my eyes. My doctor told me my health was improving and my anxiety went down. My friends and co-workers told me that my attitude had changed, but that they weren't sure how. I smiled whenever they said that. As a few weeks went by, they started asking me if they could come over. And when I told them that they could, they all noticed the garden. They loved the art piece, but I never told them where it came from. For the record, when the annual drought struck again the next year, that garden never died. I never spoke to my family again. Something died in me that night when it came to them. I think I realized that they played a part in my alcoholism. As much as I didn't want to blame them for anything I did, and as much as I wished I could take responsibility for my actions regarding the substance, it's like my sponsor says, it's a disease. It ran in my family, and there were plenty of nights throughout my life that led me to feel the way I used to. I try not to look back at them with contempt, but it is hard when they almost drove me to lose everything. In the years that followed, my friends and I formed a family of our own. It was optional. It wasn't based on competition or how we looked. We only cared about who we were. It was nothing that any of us had to be forced into, and that made it all the better. I learned to approach things in a way that was kinder and gentler to myself. I found that when I gave myself a bone every now and then, it actually pushed me to go further than encouraged me to stay back. Going to work with a full stomach led to less cravings. Letting go of the impossible standards led to less anxiety. Getting myself a new outfit made me feel better about myself because I was wearing something that I wanted and actually did end up losing the weight at a later time when I was ready. I must admit, there are days when I miss them. There are moments when I wish I could go back to the way things were so long ago, but I can't. Sometimes when I look back, I think that things used to be so much simpler, but in reality, they never were that simple. I understand that I'm in a better place now, even if things get hard from time to time. The holidays are tougher because I spend most of them by myself now. It's okay though. I have to face things on my own in some ways like I always have. They always had each other, and I didn't. I think in some ways the darkest thing I have to face is how I feel about them today. How I've always felt about them. I think it's something that's better left unsaid, because no matter how hard I've tried to put it into words, I've never been able to accurately say how I feel. Is it betrayal? Disappointment? No, not quite. Regret? No. I think it's the feeling I have when they aren't around. I feel so clean. Thank you, Alex, for that wonderful story. The end.